it is bastardized as an end-all be-all, and sometimes as the only tool that you need to stay healthy. Not even really getting into the fact that most arm care programs are just very general. Let's do some internal rotation, external rotation, etc. The adaptations that pitchers go through are very different from one guy to the next. I mean, you can see common patterns, but there's about 10 different common patterns that guys will fall into posturally and in terms of scapular movement, etc. But when you see arm care programs, everybody goes out and does the exact same thing. Do you do it post-throw? Do you do it pre-throw? Those things make a difference. If you're a guy that falls on the spectrum of I throw really hard, but I don't actually produce a lot of lower body power, you're probably at higher risk for injury as a result of that. You have to look at where that force is being generated, where it's being transferred through. And so when people think arm care, they're thinking about their shoulder. But for some reason, I don't know how that gets isolated, because when they're on the mound, they're always talking about timing and sequencing and everything having to do from the lower half through the upper half. But then when they talk about taking care of the arm, it's like, no, let's just do some J-band stuff and call it a day.
With respect to that, how do you then go about addressing it? How do you categorize it, or do you categorize it, and how do you segment it? Because I'll piggyback off of it. Can this be applied for quarterbacks or other sports where they may have to throw it? Let's say water polo.
Oh, 100%. Water polo is almost its own beast. I'll get back into that in a second. We have a catcher who's one of the best arms I've ever seen, and he was a water polo player, and we think that had something to do with it.
Okay.
But yeah, the first thing I'll do is I'll talk to the pitching coaches and pitching coaches, hitting coaches, whoever, but talk about pitchers. I'll talk to the pitching coaches and the players and ask them, what are you working on specifically on the mound? That'll give us an idea right off the bat if there's an intervention that would be possible in the weight room setting for us to make that could positively impact what they're doing on the mound. And then we'll use our evaluation skills. We'll look at common postural adaptations to pitching and things that we know are a little more on the risk factor scale. What becomes difficult is identifying what is a positive adaptation that's helping them perform versus something that is either inhibiting them from performing or is bordering on becoming pathological. And that's where having conversations with the coaches and the player are really important. Are they struggling to hold their hinge when they're trying to drive down the mound? Or sometimes you'll hear, oh yeah, my lumbar spine on one side just always gets tight as the day goes on. And certain little things like that become your indicators of now it's time to start trying to affect change instead of just trying to make this guy more powerful. I probably need to dive a little deeper.
No, I hopped into you talking about that. As they're, continuing to be that conversation, are you guys, starting off with some sort of assessment of internal, external, arm by the side, and if so, why? And if not, why not? Does it matter? Does it not matter?
We do not take every player through a biomechanical assessment the moment they walk in the door. It's really hard to do with 250 players coming in.
You guys have that many people?
Yeah, we've got 70 in the DR and another 110 stateside. Or excuse me, 180 stateside.
Wow.
So when they show up for spring training, it's like get their physicals done. We're usually practicing that same day. What I did last year, so last year was my second season in the organization, we weren't really looking at much of this stuff at all. We use force plates, and we do measure cuff strength, but even that is limited. It's really hard to measure internal, external rotation, shoulder strength at really extreme positions that they get into. So we started last year. I created a screening model and required all of our coaches to do this on every pitcher once per month. And it was basically looking at postural photos from the front, back, and side, as well as taking videos of shoulder overhead flexion and abduction, and then using that to start to bucket guys. And really just removing pieces from their program that were going to drive them into worse positions and adding pieces to their program that were going to put them in better positions. And then this year, we took it a step further, and I developed a curriculum for really, I don't know if I call it manual muscle testing, but a broader skill set of hands-on evaluation stuff. Much more in-depth than like your typical FMS or Y-balance test. This is really getting guys on a table and taking a deep dive, which is something I don't think most strength coaches get taught in school. But now we developed that curriculum, and our coaches have that tool in their toolbox, and now they're able to solve more problems.
Do you guys do the upper body Y balance test?
We don't.
Okay, and I'm not asking, like, I only asked because my athletic trainer and I were trying to figure out some things for anybody that maybe had some upper body injuries. We were looking at utilizing that. Another question I have when you mentioned manual muscle testing is, are you guys manual muscle testing, serratus strength as measured by like laying down and doing serratus punch or some sort of version of scaption, and then being like, oh, look, you're so incredibly weak? Or how do you guys go about assessing that? Because I've heard other strength coaches vent to me about that from their athletic trainer.
We don't measure that using any kind of dynamometer. We will have guys do push-ups or what do you call them, push-up plus, where they're getting into full protraction and using just a simple cat camel as part of our screening tools. What I taught our coaches is really has nothing. We use a ton of objective measurement in terms of output, but this testing that we put together, we basically threw away the goniometers. We threw away anything that's going to get down into the nitty gritty and the really granular, like, oh, he has 29 degrees of external rotation or something like that. We are looking for big picture. What are the most common patterns that we're going to see? And if we can't detect a movement restriction or a problem with our naked eye, then it's probably not going to be something that's negatively affecting them on the field. When we get into the goniometry and a lot of the dynamometry stuff, that's more in the rehab setting. But we feel like we can affect change and also screen guys in a way that fits with our workflow if we are looking at more obvious restrictions in movement rather than trying to get super fine with it.
One last question on the arm care stuff. Why is bench pressing in the outside world seem like it is absolute should never do, and same thing with overhead pressing?
I think there's a few arguments against it. I wholly believe pitchers should bench press. I think number one, it's because the best position to bench press from is having your scaps locked back on a bench, and of course we talk about free scap movement all the time with overhead athletes. But I would just say, if you're bench pressing one time a week, and everything else you do is allowing for free scap movement, that's probably not going to cause you problems. If guys are already in poor postural positions, that could create unnecessary wear and tear on the labrum, assuming you let them move into ranges of motion that they don't have. But again, that's something that's controllable. But pec tendon strength is incredibly important for the transfer of velo and getting from that laid back position to accelerating the arm forward. And we stand on the side of, of course we want to minimize injury rates, but we are chasing performance, and those two things are not mutually exclusive. Our field seems to think you have to focus on one or the other, but they're really one and the same if you're doing it correctly. The things that will help performance will prevent injury, and if you ask any player in our organization, hey, we could baby you and not have you lift weights and just try to keep you on the field, but you have a 10% chance of making it to the big leagues, or we could push the envelope. Maybe there's slightly higher risk, but now you've got 30% chance. They're all going to say, let's push the envelope. And the organization would too. Our job is in professional baseball is to create value. And you don't do that if you're working with the same guy, the same platform year after year. You have to make them better year after year.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.